Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.
Here in episode 115, we're joined by Cliff Campbell. He's Managing Director and Industry Liaison Officer for the Center for Freight and Logistics Efficiency with Electrified and Automated Trucking. That's a mouthful. It's going to be fun talking about this, where he explains what the organization does to bridge the valley of death and innovation and how the center leverages the research dollars of its members. We also have a really intriguing chat on the relationship of autonomous and electric vehicles. Hello, and welcome to this episode of my podcast series. We're going to have today joining us Cliff Campbell. He's Managing Director and an Industry Liaison Officer for the Center for Freight and Logistics Efficiency with Electrified and Automated Trucking. Now, that sounds like a long piece, but they call it FLEET. I always like to start this with how we became friends, and we haven't known each other like face to face for very long. But how did you get introduced to me, or how did we come across one another, or maybe how did you find out about NACFE?
When we first met, and I appreciate you asking a question that really doesn't rely on my long-term memory. It was May 9th of this year, 2025. And as most people in Indiana do during the month of May, I date things by what's going on at the track. And if I remember right, that day was IndyCar Grand Prix qualifications. We had breakfast at Charlie Brown's on Main Street in Speedway, Indiana, just a stone's throw from the track. It was you, Rozzy Nallum, our center director, and I sitting down to discuss our research center, your organization, along with a good sprinkling of racing and all things Speedway. I think we hit it off quite well, and I appreciate you including me in your circle of friends. Thanks.
The first time I went to the track was 1972 when I was 10 years old, so it's in my blood. There's just certain people you meet, and Cliff, I'd put you in that, where instantly there's like a camaraderie leading to a rapport that just, is going to serve you well. I think that's when we meet people, I think like there's that first connection. It's almost hard to describe. And if there is one, then I think we as people or as humans, we open up and we get serious and get into things. I remember my eggs got cold talking to you too, because we were like some school kids on the playground, yakking it up.
Right.
I want to get into exactly I want to ask you, what is FLEET and what are you trying to accomplish? How old is the organization? And because I think that's where we quickly, and I've always been curious how, academia and research fit with industry work, and how do we best take advantage of with a connection there. But walk us through FLEET.
Sure. So like you said, Center for Fleet and Logistics Efficiency with Electrified and Automated Trucking, which is a mouthful, or Fleet Center for short. It is kind of based on like 5 years of work getting to the place where we could launch the center. So we started back in 2019 with the idea of a collaboration between Purdue, Indianapolis, and the University of Memphis. And, building on the work of both universities, we recognized that there was a critical need that was not being met, namely in commercial road vehicles and logistics. And as we looked around, there were no research centers dedicated to working with the trucking industry on electrification and automation. So we went through an extensive customer discovery process, interviewed hundreds of companies in the trucking industry, and identified common needs among them, which allowed us to refine our goals into 3 main research thrusts: electrification, automation, and human factors in commercial trucking and public transportation, always keeping an eye on freight and logistics efficiency, thus the name. So, like you said, we love our acronyms. So our center is what's called an Industry University Cooperative Research Center, which is IUCRC for short, that performs pre-competitive research under the National Science Foundation program.
So that's an actual distinction.
Yeah.
Are there those in California? And
there are somewhere around 80 to 90 IUCRCs,
Yeah.
ranging from anything from, we've actually got one at Purdue that's studying insects for food and feed, which is an interesting concept. But they, yeah, so they range, across the entire spectrum of industry, and that's the key to it, is that it has to be something that industry is interested in, because the money we get from the National Science Foundation isn't a lot, right? It's a modest stipend each year that helps us pay for the administration of the center. In exchange for that, we agree to cap our overhead rates. And if anyone's ever done any research work with a university, those rates can be kind of high sometimes. But the NSF mandates that overhead can't go above 10%. The two universities got together and we quickly agreed that, we need to make that zero. So all of the research we're doing is industry funded. Industry members join our center for a membership fee, and then we pool those fees together to fund the research, and then the results are shared amongst the members.
Let me try something out on you before you go any farther. So NACFE was founded 16 years ago, and our sort of I think we're grounded in identifying and monetizing where we can the benefits of new technologies, and then also the challenges or obstacles or risks or problems, like the pluses and the minuses. And so we've done that for 16 years now in earnest on things that are either in production and available to buy on trucks and trailers, or emerging ones. And what I've found with emerging ones, and this is what I want to try out on you, is that the challenges, people want to focus on what's not working and what's hard and the challenges. And we always encourage people to make sure you're equally thinking about the benefits, because if you try to go fix some challenges and then you limit or reduce the benefits, what have you gained? So keep your eye on the benefits. Why are these things? Make sure electric trucks stay quiet, make sure they stay simple. That's where, and so on. But on the challenges side is what I want to bring up with you. We're starting to group the challenges in two kinds. One is, yes, they're challenges and problems to adoption, but the industry sort of has confidence in the, players in the marketplace that they're going to mitigate those challenges and fix them. So one is, yes, they're a problem today, but they're going to get fixed. I would tend to put the high cost of battery electric trucks in that category. I mean, there's lots of reasons why, with some scale and with battery pricing and with some, volume of some specific components that are needed for battery electric truck, and the fact that they are cheaper to build, simpler than diesel trucks, et cetera. Then there's a second category that we're starting to define, is that's the challenges that the industry just doesn't have confidence in that's going to get fixed, in the normal course of work. And so those are, in electric trucks, they might be things like how long it takes to get the interconnection to the utility grid, that edge of the grid. How do you get the power to the truck depot or to the truck stop? And, there's some, the utilities are starting up and there's promise there, but if you sat around a table with 50 trucking people that really wanted to electrify, they would say, I don't think this is going to happen fast enough for what we need. So maybe, as you were talking, maybe this is where the, organizations like yours can really fit in, where industry's identified something that we just don't have confidence it's going to get fixed by the normal's the wrong word, but the typical players in the industry, whether they're charging companies or trucking companies or truck OEMs or those sort of folks. Does that resonate with you? Does that make some sense?
Yeah, it does 100%. The entire premise for an IUCRC is to do pre-competitive research. So, you can have companies that directly compete with each other in an IUCRC, where the goal is to, we're not trying to do fundamental foundational science, and we're not trying to do advanced R&D. We're trying to bridge that valley of death in innovation that happens in the middle there, right? So, solve those kind of problems. And, to your point, one of our members is Tennessee Valley Authority, and they are very interested in what's coming, right? Because when they look at things, they're thinking 10 years, 20 years, 30 years down the road. And, when you
It takes that long to
yeah,
it takes that long to get power. So
it has. And when you look at some of these plans for charging centers, they could take as much power as a small city, right? And that's just not sitting around, that they might have the capacity somewhere, but getting it to that point, that's pretty costly and it takes quite a bit of time.
And I think this is this is all kind of coming together in my mind, Cliff. I mean, like done some work with the DOE, and there's this model and there's some fancy name for it, but there's research, applied research, and then you get into sort of like design and deployment, and then adoption and commercialization. And there's always this point in the middle. You kind of called it a valley of death. I think there's this point where there's this place in the middle where sort of like government and maybe even civil society and nonprofits and philanthropy start pointing the finger at corporations as saying, yeah, see, this will work. It's now your job to get it into real production. And then there's sometimes the industry pointing back and saying, no, it's not ready yet. We got this problem and that problem and others. And so it's sort of making sense to me now as you talk me through it, why these are important efforts. The key then is probably what we're going to continue to talk about here, and that is getting focused on what truly are the issues that need the help, and focusing both investment and resources and talent to it.
Yeah, exactly. And one of the point you just made is that a lot of companies don't have individually the research dollars that they want to spend on those ideas in that area, right? But
Right.
that's one of the big advantages of our center is that members, their research dollars are leveraged, so if you imagine a center with 10 member companies, each of them paying $50,000, now you have $500,000 worth of research being done that you have the benefit of for a $50,000 investment. So, something that you might not spend $500,000 on, 50,000 is not a bad investment to get the results of that.
Yeah. And do you ever find, I mean, sometimes companies, they, you might say it's non-competitive, but, a lot of companies are pretty driven by, intellectual property and wanting to be the first to the table, that sort of thing. Is that one of the challenges for the center?
It can be. The research results and any intellectual property that comes out of it, and sometimes it's just a discovery, right? It's not really IP,
Yeah.
but any intellectual property and the research results, industry members have a perpetual non-exclusive right to that IP that was generated in the center. And I say non-exclusive because they share that right with the other member companies. So, in an IUCRC, you'll find that there are times where companies will take that result, and the question might be, so now what do we do? And their point would be, I don't necessarily want this done in this research center because I think I'm going to identify some proprietary IP that I want to keep for myself. So they'll use the research that we've done as a foundational base and then take it on down the tech readiness ladder, if you will.
Where are you now in the start? You started it up not too long ago. You're probably into this marketing and kind of classic business development of talking to trucking companies and firms about what are the research needs, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, where are you at in that whole process, and what's the next year or two look like for you?
Yeah, so you're right. We just launched in August of 2024, and we're just really starting to get spun up. During the planning phase, you get letters of support from industry members that come to your planning workshop, and they'll write you a letter that says, this is fantastic, and You send that along with your proposal with the NSF, and the NSF looks and says, this sounds great, and it looks like you've got good industry support. So here you go, let's go. And then you find out just how hard it can be sometimes to go from a letter to a check, right?
Yeah.
So, that's kind of where we're at. We're actively recruiting member companies, but right now we've got 5 companies and we've already got 3 projects underway. So we meet twice a year in person, and then every other month we do virtual meetings. So, right now we've got 3 projects that are underway. The first one is fleet electrification case study, where we're developing a comprehensive phase transition plan for EV adoption that's aimed at achieving operational and cost efficiencies, mainly for like line haul fleets, local delivery services, and city and school bus systems, focusing on some of the key challenges like high upfront cost to EVs, limited charging infrastructure, and the complexities of integrating electric vehicles to an existing internal combustion fleet. This project actually is working in conjunction with the Shelby County School District in Memphis, Tennessee, which is in the beginning phases of replacing their entire fleet with electric buses. So when it's complete, this study will result in a model for fleet electrification. Another project that we've got going that I'm really excited about is called the Transverse Homopolar AC Machine. And we're funding the development of a new type of a motor that reduces the use of rare earth magnets and allows for the direct cooling of the magnets and the windings by moving them all to the stator, so that the rotor itself has no windings in it. Number one, it makes it a lot more maintainable. You can do direct cooling on that. And like I said, you're not using rare earth magnets, and on top of that, it's operating at increased efficiencies over traditional EV motors.
Wow. So it sounds like even in those first couple of projects, it's really a wide range. I mean, the first one being sort of like,
Yes.
operational, how do fleets do this, all the way down to, a design of a motor. So was that intended kind of a broad scope? And did you pick 2 projects that were kind of all the way to the left and all the way to right, or were you just kind of?
Well, the thing is that so in the first meeting we had, which we held down in Memphis back in October, you really haven't worked with the members as a true industry advisory board, right? So you kind of have, and if I remember right, we had somewhere around 17 or 18 projects that we proposed to them. But you propose these projects to them, they look at them, they discuss them, and then they do things like combine them, right? So we have a comprehensive mobility report that combined 2 other projects into one.
I imagine there's some like simple supply and demand activity going on here too. There's what do the customers, or what are the, fleets and industry what are their problems? What do they want to solve? And then there's sort of a resources and capability that the universities have, or the universities and then the center has to basically solve those problems. So there could very easily be a bunch of problems that you just don't have the people to do the work. And then there's other problems that may not be high on the industry list, but you're very well prepared and capable of doing.
There's stuff that our center is not necessarily going to concentrate on that really needs addressed, like legislation and liability concerns and things like this that'll get in the way of adoption. And we try to stay inside that engineering boundary as much as we can.
At the highest level of the definition of the center, you have electrification and autonomy. And so maybe it's too early to ask you this question, but it has been a bit of a debate or discussion. Are these independent of one another, or are they dependent on each other? And if the latter is a little bit true, even, how do we take 1 + 1, one of electrification, one of autonomy, and turn it into 3 or 4 or 5 or 6? So, I recall in the very early days of like taxi or passenger car automation, some OEMs were saying we're only going to automate driver out automation. We're only going to do that with electric cars because we don't want these, gasoline cars just driving around in lieu of expensive parking, say in downtown Chicago or New York, and just driving around while they're waiting for their increasing vehicle miles traveled and so forth. And then on the truck side, if we can take the driver out, we've done some work at NACFE on automation. If we actually get the driver out, then we save about a third or more of the cost per mile in driver wages and direct labor costs. But then you also something like 40% of the highway tractor cost and weight is there for the driver. I mean, the entire cab, you don't need seats, you don't need air conditioning if there's no driver. But then you've got a 24/7 kind of truck that can roll the tires all the time. So what time do you have then to charge or fuel and some other pieces?
At the end of all of this, right, we'll see true autonomous trucks that, you tell them where to pick the trailer up and where to drop the trailer off, and then that's it, you're done, right? But I think, what's more realistic is that, you're going to need a person, right, when things go wrong. It's all about edge cases, right? And now we're running autonomous trucks in here and there, and I get that, but there's always they might have solved, a couple thousand edge cases. Well, that's a couple of thousand down and a couple of million left to go, at least before I want to be in a 2,500-pound car driving beside them. So, that's one part of it. The other is that, I think you're going to have someone in that car or in that truck, at least one of the trucks. So, if you think about, let's say you've reached like level 4.5, right? Because I don't know how long it'll take to get to a full level 5 scenario, but I can imagine where you've got the driver is more of a fleet management person that might be in the lead cab of a fleet that's running 4, 5, 7, 10 tractor trailer combinations in a caravanning operation, where just the first one has a person in it, and his job isn't to drive or even be a safety driver, but he's there to help manage the fleet, help it determine its route when things go awry. And if something breaks, someone's got to be there to put out the triangle, right? And get the vehicle to a safe location.
There's a difference between level 5 automation in a city or off the highway and level 5 automation on the highway. I think the difference would be you have to control and just require a driver in the truck for the off-highway trucking activities.
Yep.
And that's where you probably end up with a cab that's similar to today. Maybe it doesn't have a sleeper. It's a rough day cab, and maybe we don't have the amenities in it because the driver's not in it all the time. The driver only needs to be in that cab from the exit ramp to the dock. And so
kind of like a harbor pilot, right?
Yeah. It could be more like a yard dog truck than
exactly.
10 years from now, what does success look like for this center? I mean, when you look back a few years from now, call it 5 or 10, and you say, okay, well, yeah, that was a great idea, and we really made a difference. What would be some of your elements of that would say that the center was really successful in what your vision is here in the first couple of years?
Solving the problems that need to get us to the next point. Success will look like us having, a sustainable number of members and just, working for the benefit of them. And that's kind of the difference between an IUCRC and other type research centers that are totally funded by the government. We're in effect basically just an industry consortium, and we work at the pleasure of industry, giving them benefit. And if we're not, we won't be in existence. You can find our center at www.fleetcenter.org.
I think in the last 30 minutes, we can see why we became friends so quick. Like a lot of commonness between what the problems are and challenges as well as the benefits. Thanks a lot, Cliff.
Mike, thanks for having me.
Freight Efficiency with NACFE's Mike Roth and Friends.